I can't find a seconder usually when I propose this, but I don't care. I don't need a seconder. My own opinion is enough for me, and I claim the right to have it defended against any consensus, any majority, anywhere, any place, any time. And anyone who disagrees with this, pick a number, get online, and kiss my ass.
No representation is made that the quality of legal services to be performed are greater than the legal services provided by other lawyers. I'm Harry Steele. You found the Backstory Podcast, number 143, the Taxman Hummeth. I'm joined today by my partner in crime, Mr. Francis Paul Rip. How are you today, Mr. Rip?
Very good. The Rip Report, not-for-profit consumer group.
And Mr. Brandon Mosley, journalist at altoday.com and our resident reporter in Moody, Alabama. Is that a fair portrayal?
Yep, that would be correct. How are y'all this week?
Really
Very
good, man. So you were monitoring the goings-on in the state legislature, the use of the American Rescue Plan funds. And that was
that was a hearing we had on Tuesday.
That was a joint legislative committee, and that is chaired by State Senator Greg Albritton from right down here in our little area, huh?
Yeah. Albritton from Atmore.
Yeah, so we'll get back to that in a second. Paul has been pining about this for quite some time, the end of print journalism, and we passed a milestone on yesterday. The Press Register runs for the final time as the printed word.
And I would predict that the corruption problem that we see is going to get far worse in the next year or two now that we don't have, or we're going to be limited to no print press on this. Okay. Other than Lanyap, they'll be the only one down in this area that's got anything print.
So, Brandon, do you see this as a reality? I mean, looking at it from the outside and not being a process resource guy, it looks to me like a reallocation of resources into an area that may be profitable, and it may raise the standard of reporting. But to Paul's point, you're not going to find a Press Register laying around at the when you go get your hair cut. You know what I mean? At the barbershop. Yeah,
the day of you being able to walk down the street and see a headline in a newspaper box or a newspaper stand. Say, I want to read that. Those are gone. You pretty much have to be online looking for your news. At Alabama Today, Alabama Political Reporter, whatever the Montgomery Advertiser's online portal is, or AL.com,
right.
At 1819 Yellowhammer. We have as many outlets as we used to have 20 years ago. But again, it's pretty much all electronic.
Right. Mm-hmm. Well, maybe it's a good thing. Maybe we're entering a different time, and the printing press isn't as important as the podcast.
Oh, we definitely are.
The problem is, in the old days, when you wanted to get a job, or you wanted to buy a car, or you wanted to buy a house, you wanted a new piece of furniture, you bought a newspaper,
right? And
you started checking the ads out. What you gonna buy for Christmas? All those things, you now go to toys.com or
Facebook page for Baldwin County Buy Sell Trade.
Yeah, you just Google it, and then 100 ads pop up. So all that revenue they used to subsidize the content creation side, the news gathering side of the business is gone, which means, we're all electronic, but there's a far fewer reporters, and they're being paid for by a much smaller revenue stream than what the old classic newspapers to be supported by.
Well, and Lanyap's what, 99 cents a day or something like that, Paul?
I'm not sure. It's not really a bad price. And you still have, a tremendous amount of people that want to read. They want to read paper,
right.
So I think this is going to be, personally, I think this is going to be a boost for Lanyap.
Well, I don't know about how many of y'all keep a crab trap in the water, but newspaper is one of the most important tools that you can have to have a good crab boil. So I will keep my hands on something in print. Hey, does anybody know if the Pensacola News Journal? I'm sure it's still being printed, right? I mean, that's
also cleans glass good.
Exactly. Bottom of the birdcage kind of stuff. So while all that's going on, all this is going on, while the press is retooling, we got strippers at the VA homes, the Taxman.
Hey, what VA home is that?
That's the one Paul wants to go to.
Oh, my God.
Are y'all aware? Okay, so back in the day when I was a county manager, I was in Gadsden and Etowah County were in the plume potentially if something went wrong at the Redstone Arsenal incinerator, right? It's kind of like a nuclear weapon goes off. I think I want to die in the first wave, not suffer and have my skin boil off my body, that kind of thing. But anyway, I had to go do a bunch of hazmat training and stuff. And the thing that keeps me up at night is all these trains running through these little towns in the middle of the night carrying God knows what. And this is a good example of how ill-equipped we are to deal with any damn thing, especially a train derailment with, what was it, polybutyl something or other, some inorganic component that they decided to set fire to.
Yeah,
it was a
controlled. You remember BP?
It's like they called John Wayne and detonated the whole damn thing.
Remember BP?
I do, and I remember how it took years and years. And the thing is, this was a preventable accident. They had an alarm going off saying the axle was overheating because the bearings were going out. Did y'all know that? I mean, these are just. I mean, after 3 weeks, even Pete Buttigieg showed up, right? Anyway, it's been a nightmare for old Sleepy Joe, and I don't know,
Yeah, but those trains, those big freight trains have more cars than they've ever had, and they have fewer workers on the train.
They can run up to a mile long.
Yeah, I mean, they just go on.
Ask the people in Alabaster.
It used to be like 40 or 50 cars. That was a train.
So I was a city planner in a city that had Highway 59 and I-65 running through it, but there was no way to get over the train tracks. They'd never built a viaduct. 55,000 people live in that town, and they sit there for 2 hours a day waiting on a train.
That was the case in Birmingham, over by Birmingham Southern, for quite some time. The exact same thing. And Birmingham Airport was one of the only airports in the entire United States that you had to cross railroad tracks to get to.
So do you know what built the railroads? Corruption. That's right. Free land, corruption, and an unlimited supply of cheap labor.
And we're hugely behind in our rail transport system compared to some other countries.
Well, passenger rail. It is an orchestra of perfection, most of it. I mean, it's like a conductor moving all these things around, the map. Go to a big rail yard, man. Even over here at the port in Mobile, you'll be wowed at what they get in and out of there in a day.
Yeah,
they're about to launch a major expansion of that terminal.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. Well, now that we've got all this money laying around.
The container stuff.
So, anyway.
More container stuff coming from China.
I wanted to just mark the occasion that this is the second year of the war in Ukraine, and it looks like we're going all in on a proxy war, gentlemen.
Well, you can not go in and go in later if you want to, or you can take a stand here with them. That's what it's going to come down to.
Yeah, it's kind of like
$100 million on Ukraine.
100 billion. Billion.
100 billion, whatever.
Billion.
And we're going in and doing another round of supply of weaponry.
Well, I can tell you from my personal experience, I'd rather see us throw money at it than men and women.
Yeah, well, they've already lost like 200,000 people.
Now, that's the thing, Brandon, that gets me is the loss of the Soviets have taken is, man, it's like double that of the Vietnam War.
Hey, listen, dude, we could get into the Weber group and this thug general. So do y'all know that there's a general running around who's not really a general, who just goes around and gets guys out of the gulag and says,
Yeah,
look, you're probably going to die, but we're sending you to the
the
front.
Wagner group. If you're
Yeah,
in the
the Wagner
gulag,
group.
you haven't been fed in a while. It's like, do you want to volunteer and fight for Mother Russia and get out of here, or stay here and be in freezing temperatures with very little food? Well, I'll take my shot. Raping and pillaging the Ukraine country.
Right.
And that's exactly what they've done. And it's really, well, and you say they've lost 200,000 people. They've lost 1 million people over the Polish border. Anybody that had a car that could run got the hell out.
Yeah, 8 million Ukrainians have been displaced by this war.
8 million. Mm.
And don't forget, it's the breadbasket of Europe. Like, ain't nobody out there planting fields right now. What do you think that's going to do to commodity prices? What do you think and I don't know if old Sleepy Joe and the Norwegians blew up that the pipeline or not, but somebody blew the pipeline up, and that was a major
on the Soviets.
Well, maybe, but somebody blew it up, and it's something that we should have had our eye on, wouldn't you say?
Well, that's pretty hard to keep your eye on that. It's at the bottom of the sea.
All right, so I thought we'd bring it back to Alabama for a little while and talk about with all this money flying around, the food stamp cut start next week in Alabama. How much less will people receive? And to your point, Brandon, this the SNAP program, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, we used to call food stamps, was juiced over the last 2 years because of the COVID-19 relief.
Yeah, those are federal dollars.
Yeah, so it looks like $180 a month per household. That's a lot of money for some people around here. And
that'll buy a lot of ramen noodles.
It's a whole lot of potatoes and onions and chicken necks and whatever else people eat that don't have any money. But at the same time, we're back to your America Rescue Plan article, Brandon, and I'd like for you to stretch your legs and just kind of tell us what you saw and what you reported on and what you thought was important.
Okay, the state received, they already had the CARES Act money, but the state received $2.12 billion, the state government now, $2.12 billion under the American Rescue Plan Act.
God.
Half that has already been appropriated by the Alabama legislature, and we're trying to get it spent before, if you don't get it spent by 2026, it has to go back to the federal government, which we don't want to happen.
That ain't going to be a problem.
They spent $400 million, on the, starting the mega prisons project. There's another 200 or so billion that's going to water projects. And then the next big thing that they're pushing is rural broadband expansion. Of course, in the hospital's got $80 million, and the nursing home's got another $80 million. And there's odds and ends that got money as well.
Can I throw in something here real quick? And I know I keep harping on it, and it seems ignorant, but the partnership with the broadband, the reason we have Section 93, 94, and 95 of the Constitution of 1901 was because the strangulated counties of the 1830s, when all of the counties went in and bought railroad bonds. Okay? So, hence, all of these counties where the railroad didn't go through obviously went broke. And that was about 2/3 of the counties in the state of Alabama. So they said the state nor any subdivision thereof can lend their credit or give resources to private enterprise. And we actually approved a constitutional amendment saying, no, because it's broadband and because it's so important to us, we are going to give money to these companies to provide services to our citizens.
And they're getting,
it's a
hundreds
slippery
of millions
damn
of
slope. It's a slippery slope. I just don't think it's a good idea.
Alabama.
Well, but the problem is, did you hear anybody espousing my perspective on this thing? No, because none of them have ever read the damn Constitution, nor understand its implications, I dare say.
Well, the problem the state was running into is that, our big problem is we've got a lot of rural counties that people don't want to live in anymore. And it's difficult to attract employers there. And, employers are basically saying, hey,
listen, man,
you've got to be able to communicate on the internet to buy stuff and sell stuff. And
so, Brandon, 20 years, 50 years ago, it was potable water. 40 years ago, you had to have a hospital to be able to get an economic development project. Then it was, wastewater. Now it's telecom. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah. Young people want to be on their little phone, talking to their little friends, wherever, and they don't want to live in a town where there's not broadband. So all this federal money became available thanks to COVID-19 and, the Rescue Plan Act and the CARES Act. And, one of the things that the federal government will allow you to spend money on is broadband.
Except Alabama has a provision against that, and we preemptively changed the Constitution in this one instance where it's not prohibited, is what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
So anyway, they also talked about prison oversight, and in your article, you pointed out that there are fewer corrections officers now than when they tried to start fixing the problem several years ago when the Trump administration said, hey, this is cruel and unusual to put anybody in the Alabama prison system.
Well, what happened to them was the Southern Poverty Law Center sued on behalf of some current and former inmates of the Alabama Department of Corrections. And the federal judge that got that case, Judge Myron Thompson, ruled.
I've been in his crosshairs before. Go ahead.
Yeah, Judge Thompson ruled that the state needed to hire 2,000 prison guards immediately so it wouldn't be so dangerous in there for the prisoners, because there's not enough guards to protect them 24/7 from their fellow inmates. And we've been trying to hire guards. We've raised the pay. They've been given retention bonuses, signing bonuses. You can make a quick $5,000 if you'll sign to be a prison guard. But unfortunately, that hasn't helped. And instead of getting more guards, we actually have less guards. So when the judge gave this order, and we're down to 1,732, according to what Commissioner Ham told the legislature on Wednesday.
Well,
and since then, the Department of Justice has sued the state, saying that incarceration by the state of Alabama constitutes a cruel and unusual punishment, given the high rate of people being raped in prison, murdered in prison, and all the drugs that's flowing around in the prisons. The suicides and the conditions.
Yeah, not everybody that dies in prison that's ruled a suicide was actually a suicide. Is that a shock to anybody?
Well, you had to give them a cause of death, and they died.
So it must have been suicide.
A very, very, very sad reputation to have in the United States, I tell you, to be the worst.
So while we're talking about this for a second, and I may be misremembering, but I believe it was a few weeks ago, I read about a fellow that was taken to the Walker County Jail, and they put him in a restraint chair naked and put him in a freezer, and he froze to death.
Yeah.
They left him in a freezer.
I think that was a jail, though, not
right.
a prison.
It was a county jail, but same indifference, man.
Well, I don't want to blame people's religion, but historically, we've had a fire and brimstone view of good and evil. The good people go to heaven, and the bad people will be, tortured in hell for the eternity. Some Alabamians historically have you necessarily can't have heaven on earth, but apparently we can create hell on earth. And they're quite comfortable with the prisoners not having enough to eat, being cold at night, being scared to death, and, just horrific conditions. You could write about it all day long, and it just doesn't strike a note with the people in Alabama.
Nope.
Indifference.
Well,
Yeah,
but
they deserved it. They shouldn't have done what
that's
they
right.
done.
I hate to quote Trump, but some of these guys are some real bad hombres, right?
Yeah, I'm not saying that the prisoners.
And the idea that we only got 1,700 corrections officers separating me from 21,000 violent offenders, it's kind of like the trains coming through town at night.
Most of them are in barracks, where there's 80, there's
Right.
like 110 beds in a dorm that was built, 70 years ago for like 60 people. And
Holman, I think was supposed to have about 750. I think now they got under 200, and the reason is that most of it's been condemned.
Yeah, they had to condemn it. We had a 100-year-old facility at Draper that condemned right recently.
Yeah.
Right, and it wasn't a beautiful castle-looking place like Shawshank. So, the next person to appear, well, there were several different presentations to this joint committee. One of them was education, and if anybody has time, you ought to go to Vimeo and watch that video. This next, I don't even know how to describe this guy. I personally do not like him. I do not think he is a very good professional, and I certainly don't know. And I may be wrong. He may have a PhD in molecular biology or something like that, but he doesn't strike me as a scientist. He doesn't strike me as anything but a bureaucratic pencil pusher.
Absolutely
as
agree.
little as humanly possible.
Of it.
Little as humanly possible. And just Alabama Department of Environmental Management Director Lance LaFleur has been under fire by environmental groups and the media for a long time. I'm a lawyer. I'm none of those things, okay? I'm just somebody that's got to live in this damn state, and I'm telling you, this guy is a joke. So ADEM's commissioners are reviewing his job performance. This was a while ago, and Paul and I were reminiscing that this Black Warrior River spill that they're talking about here killed 175,000 fish when sewage lagoon at the Tyson poultry factory, the dam gave way or whatever. Something totally foreseeable.
And you don't know what the very long-term effects are of things like that.
All right, so LaFleur gets up there and tells us what about the water? But you said $100 million, $200 million in water improvements.
The first batch of water improvements, is north of 250 million. But when we appropriate the next billion, of course, then there's still Build Back Better infrastructure money coming to that too. It's probably going to be in the tune of 800 million when we're all said and done.
So tell us about the projects and how he's going to rate them. It sounded to me like, it was going to be like 80-20 money for the systems that could afford it. And the systems that couldn't afford it, it would be 100% just a gift, a grant.
Yeah, they're doing it. They're doing it three ways. There's state money, or there's money that's put up by the local utility, as matching dollars. And then there's, loans that ADEM makes to other people. And then there's some that can't pay a loan that's just going to get a grant. And so basically ADEM has taken proposals from like every water system in the state that wants something improved or made operable. And they've ranked them based on their finances. So if your system can't raise its rates any higher because they're already through the roof, and you're not growing, so you're not getting tap-on fees. That's a big source of revenue for, a utility like a sewer system is new tap-ons. You're not getting new tap-ons. And, like I said, your population's declining, so you're losing customers over time. You obviously qualify under the model that ADM has set for distributing this ARPA money ahead of a system that, is growing, has new tap-ons, and has money in the bank.
All right, so after he kind of explains all this, Mr. Albritton recognizes our state senator, the Taxman, Chis Elliott. So let's listen to that for just a minute.
Senator Elliott.
Director LaFleur, thanks for coming today. You said trust but verify, and that's a good one. Since we started these ARPA Oversight Committee meetings, you and I have had discussions about need, and the discussion of need, and you brought that up. I stopped counting about 27 different times that you said need in your presentation. And we have talked about what is defined as need, and that the legislature, as you pointed out in the opening of your presentation, allocated $5 million to a pilot program in the Black Belt, but then bifurcated the balance of that funding for those projects that were largely based on financial need as well as the needs of the system, but then those that stretched those dollars as far as they could for the other $100 million. My concern is, and has been, and continues to be, as is evidenced by the numerous different pieces of communication to your office, phone calls, emails, etc., that in the fastest growing county in this state that sees 8,000 new people a year, that at one time in a snapshot after the 2020 census represented 48% of the state's entire growth, my district received no funding.
Woo!
0 projects. That's not acceptable. And I would submit that one way to make sure we deal with the problem of spending this money in a timely manner is not to exacerbate that problem by providing more of it, and instead use it in a different manner. I've had this discussion in every single oversight committee meeting we've had. The pro tem appointed me to this committee because I had this concern going in that this appropriation may be used in this way. And I remain very concerned about it. And I will tell you, I may very well end up taking the posture, as I have watched my colleague from Greene County do, and spend a lot of time on the floor if we're going to continue to spend money, not only in places that need.
So, Brandon, spending a lot of more time on the floor, is he talking about filibustering other people's legislation?
Exactly. The college he's talking about is Bobby Singleton. He's actually from Hale County, but who represents Greene. And, as the leader of the Democrats, when there's something that the Democrats don't like, they can't let it come to a vote because they'll get outvoted by Republicans. But what they can do is we're going to take an hour talking about the BIR. We're going to take an hour talking about the bill, and you're going to have to come up with 3/5 of this body to filibuster me to make me shut up. That's what he's threatening here.
Is that all it takes? I mean, I'll start paying the bribes today.
Well, let me get this straight. What he's saying is, if I understand it correctly,
because we're not getting any money.
Because we don't come into the category of need that they have set up.
Lance LaFleur told him in the next exchange that our model doesn't take into growth. See, with Baldwin County, when they build a sewer line, it's they build it assuming there's going to be another subdivision come along that's going to tap into that. The model doesn't that ADM designed for distributing this money does not factor in growth. So these places like in Lowndes County, there's no growth. There hasn't been any growth in 40 years. There won't be any growth.
All right. So
you do have need because you've got people there with substandard,
Yep. And that,
septic systems.
all right, I got a question for you. So in a situation where some dude goes out in the middle of a bean field and puts 20 trailers, and where we've seen just these cisterns of crap, right? They just got running into a hole. There's not a water system there. Well, let's assume there is a water system, but it's, like you said, Hale County or Greene County or somewhere like that. They don't have a sewer system. So who is the grantee going to be? Who's going to come in and maintain that little package plant they're going to build to unscrew what this guy's done, putting these 20 trailers on 5 acres?
Yeah.
And why is it the state of
a
Alabama's
lot of times
problem
those
to fix
trailers
it?
have been there for decades, if not a century, or those homes, been there for a century. And there's been a need, and especially in the Black Belt, people just built a house or had a trailer towed in, and they, couldn't get a official perk test to perk the property to get a traditional septic system installed. So what they did was they put an outlaw system, or they ran a pipe in the woods.
That's what I'm talking about. Who
and
are they going to give
all
the money
that
to?
has created a need. And again, the person that's probably responsible for it is probably dead by now in many cases.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Who we're going to give this money to fix this problem? Is ADM going to go in and build a little package plant at every one of
there's
those
going to be
places?
little systems that
County.
that are going to, present a proposal to ADM saying, hey, I can run a sewage line out to these people and connect them, but you've got to pay for it.
Mm-hmm.
And
Dude,
every water system in the state has presented these proposals for things like that to ADM, who's having to sort through them all and decide which ones to fund and which ones not to fund.
This all sounds real sketchy to me. And that's a majority of who's going to get this money. Like I said, I don't trust that snake. But let's just take, for instance, the Pritchard Water Board, where they're about to default on a $55 million bond, and all of their board members and executives are cooling their heels, waiting on their corruption trial to roll around. They'll get unlimited amounts of money. So,
in Pritchard's case, they have customers that are being poorly served. They have a system that routinely ends up dumping sewage
elect better people to office.
And since they've squandered or stolen all their money, they don't have the money to do anything themselves, and their rates are already, as high as their neighbors, so they can't raise their rates further. So they would, under the ADM model, qualify for more funds. But ADM is requiring, and they're paying for everybody to be audited, so they can kind of see who has money, where the money went. I don't know if anybody with the Attorney General's office or the Justice Department is looking at these audits. But in a system like Pritchard, it might be, very revealing.
I would say so. All right, Paul, this one's just for you, man. So, Barry Moore, who is a congressman from where? Wiregrass?
Enterprise.
Yeah,
represents the 2nd Congressional District.
Has proposed a bill to make the AR-15 the national gun of the United States. By the way, one of the guys included in this quartet with Barry Moore is Representative George Santos, the guy that lied about his background and all that. Yeah.
I don't know how. I mean, you think somebody is thinking this up to see how much they can embarrass the state,
Yeah, but this guy's like I said, he's a goob, and he wants to go on MSNBC and be taken apart.
That's
he
what
just
I'm
wants
saying.
the publicity.
Yeah, and look what he's doing to the state in the end.
All right, so that brings us to Brandon's February 17th article. Alabama has the 5th highest gun death rate in the U.S. 26.09 gun deaths per 100,000 residents in 2021. Mississippi was the only one higher. Oh, not the only one. Louisiana came in second, 28.4, and New Mexico and Wyoming were third and fourth. So what's the reason, Brandon? I'm sure you talked to a bunch of egghead experts.
Well, Alabamians love them. When they have a dispute, they'd rather not go to court, so they settle it out in the driveway with guns. And they shoot each other. And when life's too difficult for them, instead of taking pills and killing themselves that way, they shoot themselves in the head. That number is total suicides, murders, and gun accidents.
So all of them.
Yeah, just death by a gun.
But what Brandon is saying is the key, the availability of the weapon. They have the weapon, then they're in a situation that they're not used to, and they grab the weapon to settle whatever that situation is, and it doesn't do anything but either end it or end somebody else's life.
Well, let me tell you, the only time I ever think about this thing as a problem solver is if somebody's trying to kick my front door down and they're not an invited guest.
Well, that's a totally different thing.
Other than that, anybody that thinks of that strapping a gun on makes you a man, that makes you a candy ass son of a bitch in my book.
Well, it does make it a lot easier to carry a gun if you don't even have to have a damn permit.
Yeah, and you shouldn't have to have a permit. It is your Second Amendment right to walk around with a damn gun if you're a law-abiding American.
Why in the hell do I have to have a permit to drive a car?
It's because that's not a right laid down in the Constitution. I'm serious.
Yeah, right.
It is a privilege to drive on the public provided thoroughfares of the state of Alabama.
Yeah,
and you have to get a license and you have to follow the rules of the road.
I think you ought to have a permit and you ought to have to take a qualified hourly course.
Yeah, see, Paul, we took care of your opinion about 200 years ago. So,
all right,
I'm just saying there's no. Okay, so to your point, and let me say this: on Thursday, I took my little dog wherever he's running around to the Lake Forest Animal Clinic, right? And then got home to find out that there was this shooting about 3 blocks from where my vet's office is. And so, anyway, quadruple murder in Daphne, one of the most tragic cases we've had, says the Baldwin County Sheriff. Lake Forest Subdivision is considered a safe place for families along the Eastern Shore. But after 4 people were killed on Melanie Loop, Baldwin County Sheriff Huey Mack said he is in disbelief. So, there's the Jared Smith Bracey, 21, faces 4 counts of capital murder for an incident in Daphne, Alabama on Wednesday, February 22nd. So, Brandon, tell me what you know about this thing.
Jared admits to killing, his grandparents, Barbara Smith, age 72, Leonard Smith, age 80, his brother, Jeremy Smith, age 27, and a family friend of the Smiths, Sheila Glover, age 71.
Damn.
So he shot everybody in the backyard and killed his grandfather who was inside with a pickaxe. And then he came back outside and pickaxed everybody after they were dead. So do you want to hear the kicker, Mr. Rip?
What?
Daphne officials say quadruple homicide suspect arrested prior to the murders. Police say the man accused of murdering 4 people Wednesday evening was arrested earlier in the day for an incident at the same location where he later killed 4 people.
Oh, boy. There's going to be some questions asked there.
Oh, I'm sure the major crime. You do see the major crimes unit swoop in real quick. Like, you got the mouthpiece for Daphne right there, and you see Wilters, and then you recognize Teresa Hines. She's our ace, right?
Right.
She's the one that prosecutes all the capital cases and stuff.
But now law enforcement has repeatedly said that the judges are allowing people out too quick, and that it's a revolving door where
that you don't get to do that. This was an incident that happened with a family, and they ought to have training. And just like if you get arrested for domestic violence, right? They're supposed to keep you for 24 hours. What was the incident?
Well, what was the arrest for?
That's the question. That's
I'm sure all that'll come out.
$64,000 question. Oh, I'm sure it won't. Like another thing that's not going to come out. So when Feinbaum says something doesn't smell right, something doesn't smell right. So Brandon, I'm ignorant of all things that happen in Tuscaloosa by design. Why don't you tell us what Feinbaum's talking about and who Stephen Smith and Brandon Miller are?
Yeah, I just heard bits and pieces of this story myself.
Earlier this season, there was an incident on the Strip where Darius Miles.
And the Strip is a strip of bars and restaurants.
Yeah, in Tuscaloosa, where
along Tuscaloosa Avenue.
Foolish people spend their money on alcohol they don't need. But anyway, the players were down there, and this young couple were down there, and Darius Miles, who was on the University of Alabama basketball team, made advances, is my understanding, on a young woman, Tamia Harris, who was there with her boyfriend. Apparently, the boyfriend and Miles had some kind of exchange. And Miles then texted, a freshman on the basketball team, Brandon Miller. Now, Brandon Miller is probably the best basketball player that's ever played for the University of Alabama. He'll be a lottery pick in the NBA draft. And he said, we've had an issue. We've had an altercation. I need you to bring me my gun. So Brandon Miller, in his 18-year-old wisdom, drove the gun down to Darius. Darius gives the gun to their little flunky friend, Michael Davis. And then Michael Davis allegedly fires the gun into Tamia Harris's and her boyfriend's vehicle, killing Tamia Harris.
Now, the boyfriend returned fire, right? Because another vehicle was hit. I thought the Dodge Charger being driven by Brandon Miller was hit with a gunfire.
Yeah, there may I'm not sure about all that, but the interesting part that came out this week was the testimony that it was Brandon Miller that brought the gun, because Miles was kicked off the team immediately following this incident, but since then,
but he got charged with murder, right? He got charged with accessory.
Yeah, he's charged with murder. Now, Brandon Miller, who just brought the gun to the scene, that became the weapon that killed poor Miss Harris, was not charged with anything.
Nor has he been disciplined by the team.
Nor
has the university said a word.
They did not suspend him. And Alabama is leading the SEC in basketball. They're 15-1 in conference and 25-4 at this point total, season long. And they're 2 games ahead of Texas A&M for number 1 in the SEC at the moment.
And he brings the gun. He brings the gun to him and gives it to him, and then he shoots Harris.
No, and
he gave the gun. It was Miles who asked for the gun.
Right.
Miles then hands the gun to the flunky, who's not on the team, but apparently a friend of Miles and Miller. And then Michael Davis is the actual shooter. But the Tuscaloosa police say that he did the shooting on the orders of Darius Miles.
And when they asked the coach about it, he said, "Well, we don't do investigations. We leave this up to the professionals, and we cooperate." Not what a bunch of bullshit.
Yeah, Coach Nate Oates said that
They got Matrix LLC in high gear as soon as the damn bullet hit the ground. Like the idea that there isn't an investigatory arm at the University of Alabama is a bunch of BS. And
they claim they don't investigate criminal matters that are being handled by the authorities.
Mm-hmm.
My God, you've read all the articles about the University of Alabama, Harry. Come on down.
All right, so the Alex Murdaugh trial is in week 3 or something like that. I don't know. It's all over cable news, and he denies killing his wife and son, but he admits that he lied about his alibi, and this is the one thing that you never do. And this is how you know he's guilty as hell, because he's going for broke, hoping he can hang the jury. That's all this is. Do you agree? Can you imagine any other reason for him to take the stand?
You don't want to say never testify, but generally for the accused in a murder case to testify, it's pretty desperate. It's like when they put O.J. on the stand in his trial.
Right. Well,
you're hoping that the alleged perpetrator will charm the jury into believing, oh, that man wouldn't have done it.
So his favorite son, Paul, the one he didn't murder, had a drunken crash in his father's boat some 4 years ago. And these are the reasons you don't let your client testify, because they can bring up anything, right? So they put him on the stand and they say, well, back when your son, when this girl died in this boat wreck, didn't you show up? And this is him at the hospital that night. See that badge hanging out of his pocket? That's a solicitor's badge. And there he is again. And so he shows up at the hospital and goes around and tells all these kids not to talk to anybody. And I hate Paul's not here for this, because we had something similar happen here in Baldwin County not too long ago. But I'm pretty sure that they're going to get him. But one of the other interesting things that I wanted to talk to you guys about is crime solving in the digital age. So they not only did they use his cell phone records, his son's TikTok video he shot 30 minutes before he got killed, and one of the interesting things I saw testimony about was the OnStar. So he had OnStar in his whatever GMC vehicle, and the timeline of the crime is his wife and son are murdered, and he gets in his vehicle and leaves and drives to his mother's house, and his vehicle never got under 47 miles an hour. That's pretty damn fast to be driving along throwing an AR and a shotgun out the window, don't you think? And they haven't recovered the murder weapons. So I think I'd have let my client keep his damn mouth shut, because all these other things have been brought up, and like the headline said, he denies killing his wife and son, but admits he lied about his alibi. Well, that makes you a liar from the jump, right?
Yeah.
So why would they believe anything else you said?
Well, they heard, the defense counsel heard what the prosecution had and then decided, we've got to roll the dice.
Well,
and apparently they're rolling the dice.
Maybe that's a smart play, and I'm just dumb. But I wouldn't have let him testify if he was my client. But
as a general rule, it's not good.
Well, but you got the other thing you got to understand, dude. This guy's like Albritton. He's like 6th generation, lawyer in this pretty affluent place, right? I mean, that part of South Carolina seems like a really nice place to live. Seems not too unlike not dissimilar to Baldwin County, right?
Yeah, for those of us that haven't had lots of money and privilege in our life, how people that are loaded and, have multiple streams of income get into these kind of messes where they could be locked up, in prison with the actual dregs of society, it's difficult for us to understand. But, passions get carried away, and greed is the same thing among higher classes as it is among lower classes.
And drug abuse. Remember,
drug abuse,
he's
and they
blaming
do
all this
stupid
on his
stuff.
pill addiction.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how you can steal $600,000 of your client's money and say you spend it on lower tabs. Do you?
You're almost always better off to not escalate it to violence than, it's like, oh, okay, well, if they prosecute you for a nonviolent crime, especially if it's your first offense, how much time is you going to really spend in prison?
Not long.
A rich guy, it wouldn't have been that long. A rich guy at his first offense that had otherwise lived an exemplary life, has made some screw ups, and he can claim, he can find Jesus.
And this would have been
he can get a rehab.
Yep.
And get over the drugs. And generally, the court system's going to show leniency. I mean, the civil verdict's going to hurt. But, by then, going and killing people over it, yeah, now, you could be facing the death penalty and locked up the rest of your life, because of the escalation.
Well, didn't he hire a hitman to kill him, and the guy botched it? Some guy tried to shoot him on the side of the road.
That was my understanding, was he was going to do a suicide deal, but he didn't have the guts enough to kill himself, so he hired a guy, and it didn't go well. Understanding.
So if I were him, I would have suggested, I would have Perry Mason the hell out of this thing and suggested that they didn't look at any other suspects, and I would have created a profile for somebody who may be pissed off about their $600,000 being stolen, or who knows what this guy was up to, really. I mean, quite honestly, this may just be part of the story. And I was hoping that we'd get
like
to that.
The OJ trial. If there was a credible theory that another person killed, the former Mrs. Simpson and her athletic trainer, I think Johnny Cochran would have brought it up in the case, and he didn't because it probably didn't happen. And my guess here is there probably isn't a plausible alternative that wouldn't blow up in your face if you brought it up.
All right. Well, let's talk about. Let's switch back to the state of Alabama. Tell me where this forest is and why we want to cut 646 acres of it.
The state, has been acquiring land for forever wild, so that we can have like hunting, public hunting. So everything's tied up by hunting clubs and private landlords. And as you get more land, then you have things like mining and timber resources that are now under state control. And the Forever Wild and the other, I'm on the Department of Conservation, Natural Resources, state lands, do not get an appropriation from the general fund. They have no source of income other than, what you get by one, violating a hunting law and getting a fine, or you buying a permit to hunt or fish, or you buying, guns, because, there's a tax on guns that goes to pay for, since they assumed you had guns in the old days for hunting, there's a tax there that goes to buy public lands, and then that draws down a federal match. But the State Lands Division and Alabama Conservation Natural Resources, they try to make some money off of their property. So they've got some timber up in Tuscaloosa that they would like to, got another tract in Cherokee County that they put up for bid because they believe the income is worth going ahead and cutting those trees.
Well, let me ask you this. Was it a plantation pine forest when they acquired it from U.S. Steel or Scott Paper or IP? Or it sounds like one of these tracts where they just went and bought up a bunch of timberland and now it's time to harvest. I mean, this looks like a hybrid slash. I don't know where you got this picture from, but that looks like hybrid slash.
That's not
pine forest.
necessarily.
That's not necessarily it.
Of the property. That's just a stock.
But it's not 646 acres of hickory and oak.
Yeah, I mean, most of Alabama is not in primordial forest.
Right.
Most of it was cleared, really by 1900. And what we're seeing now, Alabama's 72% forested, but almost all of that is either replanted or natural regrowth from where stuff was cut before and was in cotton for so long or cattle, and then they let it go, either planted it back or it naturally went back into forest land. And this is a tract, these are both tracts of forest land that the State Lands Division now manages. And their foresters determined that, hey, let's go ahead and cut these.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the Boy Scouts own a bunch of land, and they cut the timber off of it too. So it's not unheard
most
of.
of that, when it was first planted, went into loblolly pine because it's like the fastest growing thing, that you could plant.
Right.
And historically, pre-white man arriving, there weren't vast forests of loblolly pine.
No.
That is just what our grandparents thought would grow fast on all this cut over land and bad, wore out cotton land. And that's what the Southern, timber industry is based on. But most of the big pine forests were actually longleaf.
Right.
And there were centuries old oaks and hickories, that, we'll never see again. In those old, those forests.
Well, I just thought I thought Forever Wild meant just that, and I was, probably
they can, when you sell land to Forever Wild, they have the option of mining it, harvesting timber off of it. They can sell it and buy other land with it. They can still, if a developer comes along and says, hey, under certain circumstances, the Forever Wild Board could surplus a tract. Then they would take the proceeds and go out and buy more land. It's just, similar to it.
Well, my family pretty much gave away 200 acres in the Tensile River Delta, and it's got the largest bald cypress in the state of Alabama on it. So I'm sure they're not going to clear cut that. But every time I see something like this come up, I'm going, I sure hope I'm not sitting there on 20 acres surrounded by a clear cut from the next, until I die because they decided to cut the property that my family gave them.
And, it's possible, that anybody who's familiar with timber, you can get pine borers in a pine stand, and really the only thing you can do with that stand is say, hey, we're clear cutting it now to deal with the weevil infestation so it doesn't spread to the rest of our forest.
Right. Well, that would be an extreme case, but here they're just harvesting timber because they need some money.
That's what I think, yes. But, again, all the details I'm not aware of. I'm just aware they did advertise that they had two pretty good sizable tracts available for bids for somebody to come by.
Well, I got a sawbuck that this lady right here doesn't know, but she's certainly sure about one thing, that we're going to get back to executing people in Alabama. Did you see that announcement?
Yeah, the governor announced that at 12 noon on Friday, that they have reviewed what went wrong in those recent, two recent botched executions. And we think we have it where it's operable and the Department of Corrections can actually kill people again, hopefully without botching it this time.
Okay, so I got an idea. The state of Alabama contracts with me. They give me $5 million a year. I go get Dr. whoever studied under Kevorkian, and we come in with our own little cocktail. We get you all juiced up. You're all happy. And then we hit you and we stop your heart. How hard could that be? People accidentally overdose all the time. Why don't we just give them a whole bunch of morphine until they stop breathing? Why do we have to come up with these exotic chemicals?
Is we've got liberal legal groups, that are anti-death penalty. And on the date of the execution, the Alabama Supreme Court gives them a 24-hour window to kill somebody. You can kill them on March 12th, we're saying.
Which is why they roll 1201 or whatever, right?
Yeah, and so, at that time, all of a sudden there's motions filed before the Alabama Supreme Court, the U.S. Supreme Court. Hey, wait, there's some motion. We need to delay this. We need to put it off. And so then the Attorney General's office has to fight those motions. And they can't begin the execution until all that crap is taken out of the way. And when that happens, the inmate himself starts flexing his arms and he starts struggling. It starts moving around. And it makes it difficult for the ADOC workers to get a hold of that vein in that guy's arm to get that, killer cocktail into where it can do some damage. That's the problem with lethal injection is you've got to get it in a vein. Otherwise, you're just sticking somebody and it's not going anywhere.
Okay, so the gas chamber, they put you in a diving bell with a chair in it. They strap you down. They drop a cyanide capsule into water under you. The cyanide gas comes up and you asphyxiate. That sounds pretty damn brutal.
The state did pass legislation a few years back allowing us to go to a gas chamber style of execution. Although it's not cyanide gas, it would actually be carbon dioxide.
So you
the lack of oxygen kills you.
Asphyxiation, huh? Well, that sounds
you would just go, boom. You're there, then you're asleep, and you're gone.
I like my idea. We'll give you different options of what kind of drugs you'd like for us to kill you with, and they'll just be recreational, man. We'll get them at the border. We'll just stop, see what's coming across and see what we can get our hands on. Maybe some fentanyl. That seems like a good way for people to get a good send off. I don't know. It just seems like
I don't know why fentanyl's not
killing
used
somebody seems monumentally easy.
There's plenty of fentanyl in sheriff's evidence lockups that would send you down, to the next life very quickly.
That's what I'm saying. We can't even kill people right. What the hell's going on in Alabama's prison systems?
Yeah, I don't know what classes you have to go to learn how to kill people, but PDOC probably needs to send their workers to that class. We've had some.
All right, so
classic foul-ups.
So you're looking at an image here of the people who control your lives, ladies and gentlemen, and this week they heard oral arguments in Gonzalez versus Google Incorporated LLC. And are you familiar with the Communications Decency Act, Section 230, protection for private blocking and screening of offensive materials and interactive computer services? Basically, Google is not a publisher, right? Under Section 230. Well, the problem is when their algorithm goes in and decides what you're going to see, like if you Google Brandon Mosley, what comes up? An article by Brandon Mosley or a story about Brandon Mosley in 1987 when he was involved in a car accident? You see what I mean?
Yeah.
By curating and putting things in an order in a search engine, you are essentially you're not a neutral publisher anymore. You're pointing people to information.
Now, I agree with the concept that a Google or a Facebook or a Yahoo or a Twitter, is a private company and they can do and say what they want to say because they've got, they have the free speech rights, of any U.S. citizen, even though they're a corporation.
Right.
Where I have a problem, though, is like what's come out in the Twitter files, where these corporations are meeting with U.S. government officials in the FBI, the National Institute of Health, the National Defense Intelligence Agency, and these sorts of groups to decide who they're going to allow on their platform and what speech is allowed. Because when you start colluding with the government to limit the citizen speech,
I kept waiting for
now
the Twitter
you're not
files
a
to come
private
up.
company, but you're an agent of the government, in my mind.
Exactly. Agency. They can't.
Yeah, I mean,
they
you're
can't
a government
shut you
contractor
down.
now.
They can't shut you down for saying the whatever this mRNA delivery system is. It's not a vaccine. The government, Anthony Fauci can't shut you down, but Justice Department can send an email over to Twitter and shut your account down. Or
Yeah, I mean, Dr.
ghost
Peter
ban you.
McCullough in Texas, if he thinks hydroxychloroquine is better than the vaccine for treating COVID, he's got a medical degree and he's competent to have that opinion, whether it's right or wrong.
Agreed.
Why his opinion would be censored by Twitter, Facebook, and these entities, and Dr. Anthony Fauci's is promoted, would be up to the company, but not if the company is making that decision on the advice and orders with its federal handlers. Now we've gone into where it's the government censoring Dr. McCullough and people who share his views.
So along the same lines of Matt Taibbi is the only one that gets the information from Twitter so that he can slowly release what they want released at any given time. Do you know that Speaker McCarthy has given, I can't remember how many hours of video to Tucker Carlson showing the January 6 riots from every camera angle that they possibly have all day long? I think we're going to find out that there were some agent provocateurs in the White House, in the Capitol building that day. And I think they're going to be able to identify them pretty easily, don't you? Now that they've got the video. Not that I trust Fox News or Tucker Carlson, but I don't think they have any incentive to sit on the information.
House Speaker Kevin McCarthy tonight defending his decision to give thousands of hours of security footage of the January 6th attack on the Capitol exclusively to Fox News host Tucker Carlson. Most of the video never seen by the public. McCarthy telling the New York Times, quote, "They do belong to the American public. I think Sunshine lets everybody make their own judgment." But media watchers are concerned about how Carlson might handle the footage.
He's giving it to somebody who's been perhaps the chief propagator on Fox and one of the nation's leading propagators of conspiracy theories and baseless claims about what happened on January 6th.
Is this every hour?
Carlson has downplayed the seriousness and danger of the January 6th insurrection and made false conspiratorial claims like this on his Fox show.
FBI operatives were organizing the attack on the Capitol on January 6th, according to government documents.
Top Democrats are furious over McCarthy's granting of the footage to Carlson. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer telling colleagues in a letter that it, quote, poses grave security risks to members of Congress and everyone who works on Capitol Hill. But in defending the move, McCarthy also told the Times that he had, quote, promised to release the footage. McCarthy did indeed promise to release the video as part of his contentious bid to become House Speaker. A GOP source tells CNN conservative Republican congressman and Trump supporter Matt Gaetz had specifically demanded the footage be released as a condition of supporting McCarthy's speakership bid.